All right, hey, how's it going, guys? This is Jackson Dabney from Dabneytech. I'm joined here today by David Luff from Deed Entertainment.
Hey, everybody.
So I was
Thanks,
checking
thanks for
out
having
your,
me.
yeah, of course, man. I was checking out your page. You guys been working with Coachella, like this Electric Noel projection mapping, all these different festivals, some really cool, like top of the line, cutting edge stuff. What can you tell me about how you got started with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the path of any entertainment entrepreneur is, windy and dark, right? And so not oftentimes where you think you're going to go is where you end up, and that certainly is kind of my story. I started in the film TV side as a high schooler. I had a passion for making projects, and was on the student news, and part of the things that we did was like you would do like these like little mini video projects like every morning, and I fell in love with that, and I knew that I wanted to go pursue a film career because of it. And that led me to going to USC Film School, coming from a pretty small town in Colorado. And I really just fell in love with working with teams to build fun projects, be it a narrative project or be it a commercial, or even like working on sets. And so it really changed the scope of my life moving to LA, and I basically have never looked back since. And it's been kind of interesting, the timing of basically the patterns that happen in life, and also like how things happen cyclically, right? And so when I graduated in 2002, it was kind of the transition from 35 millimeter film only to digital filmmaking. At the time, there was this product called Mini DV, which was kind of like a small tape that you would put in camcorders. And so, but you were able to digitize it pretty quickly. And this was the beginning of, I would say, digital filmmaking. And so, in fact, my class was the first production class that ever used the digital film cameras. It was kind of interesting side story. You go to a place like USC, which has like all these pretty big names attached to it. And one of the biggest names on this new building, I was the first class to go through it, was Robert Zemeckis, right? Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Back to the Future, personal hero, right? And so I remember I was doing some editing, and he came through as like part of just a walkthrough, and I'm here like editing like a side project, and I was just like totally starstruck. We didn't get to talk or anything, but it's kind of interesting that you're in the same space with people like that. And opportunities, they happen for you if you're willing to take them, right? And so I was doing post college. I got a job at one of the oldest lighting manufacturing companies in the world. In fact, they were the first big lighting manufacturer ever, called Mole Richardson, family owned business from the 20s. You probably see like some of these old pastel or like sepia tone colored photos of big lights. Those were their lights. And so I was able through that to take a lot of indie filmmaker jobs. And so I met a lot of network of cinematographers, and was doing a lot of indie features at the time. And then we just experienced, about 2 years ago, a strike that started with writers and then went all the way up through producers and the DGA. That was all about AI, right? And the rights of the images and what was going to happen in the future. Now, in 2005 to 2007, there was another series of strikes, and that was happening over digital filmmaking, where all of that work that was happening, and it's, Hollywood's a machine, right? So once those strikes happened, all that work went to places like Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Atlanta and Texas. And so, kind of by default, I was looking for other opportunities, and back then, there was a bunch of internet job boards for technicians, and so there was a site called Mandy, and there was a site called Craigslist where you could find jobs. And so I had answered an ad in 2005, and it was for Nestle ice cream. I basically, for a long weekend, went out to Coachella and sold ice cream with one of those little pop-up carts with an umbrella for Nestle. And I had been to the first Coachella as a patron, the first one ever in 1999. And so, I really like then remembered how amazing it was to see live music outside, and like the scale of that production was huge. And I kind of knew that that was where I wanted to be. And, somewhat manifestation wise, I ended up answering another ad a few months later, and I ended up working with one of the premier lighting companies for private events in LA. Everything from the Golden Globes to Natalie Portman's wedding, right? I did all these things all over the US. And the person that booked that job, not only did they book Coachella because they were a stage manager there, but they also were pretty tied into the Insomniac network, which at the time was kind of coming out of the warehouse and out into the public eye. And so for the first time ever, they were able to basically book huge venues like the USC Coliseum for their flagship show, which is called Electric Daisy Carnival. And so I just fell in love with production, and I found it to be much more open to entrepreneurs on the event side. It seems a little bit more open market. The film business is pretty structured the way that the studio system is. And honestly, I can't think of a harder job than to write a story, get it funded, get it shot like you want, and then actually get it to play theaters and make money, especially now. And it's only been, worse and worse since I graduated. And so that was a pathway for me to just kind of see where the industry was going. And I'm glad that I did, because in 2002, when I graduated, there was about 400 films that would play a year in the theater. Now, in 25 years later, you're down to 150 films. And almost all of them are big budget productions because of just the sheer marketing spend that you have to put behind them to even play just 3 weeks. So, the opportunities for me really opened up when I started doing these larger festivals. And, I think one of the things that I'm big about is, putting together a vision board and like using that as kind of like your guiding star. And so one of the things that, as I was kind of like going out into the working force, I put a vision board together with a couple projects I wanted to do. One of them was called Festival World. And so the idea it was like kind of like a travel channel show where we would go to all these festivals and tell you why they were different and why you should go to them. And it was kind of like something you would see on like the Travel Channel or something like that. Now, I never did the show, but I have built and had a hand in leadership positions in some of the largest festivals in the United States, even beyond Coachella, like things like Outside Lands and Hangout Festival in Alabama or Electric Forest in Michigan. There's so many unique festivals out there now, and a lot of them, like the Coachellas and the EDCs of the world, they have gotten so big that they're almost like the film business. Everything's compartmentalized. Put it to you in perspective, when I started with Coachella, it was around 50,000 people per day, and that show is now 150,000 people per day and 2 weekends. And EDC was around 60,000 people per day and in LA, and now it's in Las Vegas, and they take it a whole week for shows inside town, and the festival itself starts now on Thursday, goes through Sunday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. every night, and it's 190,000 people per day. It's the largest festival in the U.S., and it's just kind of crazy to see, like, had been there when it kind of started and to see what it's become now. And I think that the way that we as a culture have attuned ourselves to experiences has shifted over the years too, which is why after kind of seeing these mergers and buyouts and see the big transitions happen in like the mid-20 teens, I pivoted into the immersive experience space because it's frankly the last, I would say, like blue ocean for entertainment. If you're familiar with blue ocean strategy, right? It's just kind of a philosophy where there's all competition is actually like irrelevant because it's good. And I believe that the immersive experience space is that way, right? I look at anyone that's releasing a ticketed experience as a collaborator, right? What are you doing that's different? How are you developing your guest experience, your theming, what sets you different? And there's so much room for that. You have experiences like Meow Wolf, which is like the blue chip standard of, I would say, like ticketed experiences, at least in 2026. And it's, they're very imaginative journeys that are hard and fast scenic build-outs that are thematic. You have things like the immersive Van Gogh experience, which ultimately has collapsed post-pandemic, but did incredible numbers for a 5-year run, right? Did something like 15 locations over the North America continent and something like, I think, 3 million tickets sold. So, and of course that was just projection mapping on walls, right? Very different experience from Meow Wolf, right? No story at all. So I'm pretty excited about the future, what it holds. Of course, there's many unknowns, but that's part of the fun.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely feel that, like, in the creative space, if you make something really cool and someone else makes something else that's really cool, that doesn't mean someone's not going to go to yours because they're going to someone else's. It's just more...
Yeah.
In that way, competition competition can also bring awareness in a mutually beneficial symbiotic way, because now that there's more different things that people can do, they kind of get more of an idea on it. I'm going to share my screen right now for Deed Entertainment so people can kind of see what's going on here while I ask these next couple questions. So you founded Deed Entertainment. This is your business, correct?
Yeah, I did. And as you can see there, it's an acronym, Dreamscape Event Environment Design, and it really started as like whatever you can dream up, we can build as like a service provider. And over the years, I've held multiple roles as like a tech director or experience producer, or site producer, or line producer, any of these things for clients. Be it a big brand that wants to do an experience at South by Southwest, or a movie that wants to release a pop-up at Comic-Con, right? Yeah, so all of this basically started as like a core thesis that we can build community through entertainment and really just through better experiences in general, right? I've been a producer for so long that I've seen so many major gaps in the guest experience and the tools that we have as producers to develop those things, that we went down our own path to basically develop our own IP, and even so far as the technology stack to deliver that IP. So that's some of the things that we've been up to, and really Deed is a collective of some of the, I would say, the best technical producers in the world, ranging from audio design to scenic fabrication to hospitality to projection mapping or lighting design. Any of these skills oftentimes all come together for this singular moment, and that moment is for other people, right? We're always kind of in the service of others, and I'm a very service oriented person, so that's probably why I've stuck with events as long as I have. It is a challenging business. You hear the horror stories of people being on the road like the whole year and not seeing their families, and that certainly can happen, and I've had years that have been like that, but I think that we as humans really, now more than ever, want to create unique memories together in a space that's shared, right? And so how do you do that? Well, you have a wide variety of containers that can be filled with a wide variety of experiences. You look at, say, like the Las Vegas Sphere, for example, right? It is a feat of technology, right? And inside and out, it is fully Vegas entertainment. But at the same time, it is really only ever going to be able to do concerts, or you could say this hybrid experience with the Wizard of Oz, right? Which in a lot of ways has kind of saved their business model, because the concerts are so expensive to do. And so, that type of container can only be filled with a few different things. I'm like a Swiss Army knife kind of person, right? So we've chosen to look at, anything from a raw open space. I mean, Coachella is a polo field. Insomniac's EDC is a racetrack. You would never know that it's a racetrack when you're there, and you certainly don't feel like you're on a polo field when you're out at Coachella, right? So kind of coming from that school, I know that there are all these tools and strategies and ways you can make a space become this magical place, if only for a few moments, right? And that's always in the service of others. Like, who's your audience? Why are they there? And what experience are they hoping to have? And more importantly, like, what are they going to say afterwards, right? We're shooting for that 11 out of 10 on the guest experience every time.
So how do you track the metrics for the guest experience?
It's a great question. Some of the things that we are putting into our technology stack are sentiment oriented. So the ability to have the guests leave, notes and surveys, those types of things. There are post-event surveys that get sent a lot of the times. There obviously is like the general media, right? Like the way that the social media and the actual Associated Press will mystically, or maybe not so mystically, like talk to the folks that have gone to the experience, and then that gets blasted on the internet, right? So good or bad, that is one of the things that happens. And, for example, one of my co-founders was behind the Westworld experience at South by Southwest. which happened in 2017 in collaboration with the show on HBO. And so that was like they literally built a western town on some random person's ranch, which was just raw land about 30 miles outside of town, and they bussed people to a functioning Westworld. They had about 70 actors that had this massive script. It was very similar to, say, like Sleep No More in New York City, if you're familiar with that, which is this kind of like pop-up experimental theater with all these different kind of choose your own adventure characters. Then it literally puts you inside the show, and that experience ran for 3 days. And if you were to Google that right now, it would come with like all of this press and media, right? Which, again, good or bad, in this case, pretty good because it was so unique and well done that it lives on past the moment. But I don't think that there's an immediacy for understanding what the experience was to people right away. I think that takes some time. We had a project called Candytopia that launched in Los Angeles in 2018. And frankly, it was kind of on riding the coattails of the Museum of Ice Cream, which was even today is open in places like New York and San Francisco, which was an Instagram museum, kind of the height of Instagram museums and the beginning of, Instagram Reels and, short form video content, a little pre-TikTok, ruling the world. So this was kind of the way that, people were going out to these experiences. And it wasn't until we were open for, let's call it about 6 weeks, that we noticed that the organic growth that came from people taking their selfies and putting it on outweighed what we were doing in paid ads. And that was the hope. You never know that that's going to happen, but that was the hope. We obviously spent a lot of time and thought into like crafting these very photo worthy moments inside the experience. But you never know how people are going to receive that information, and even more so like what they're going to do with it, right? So by making it really easy to have these like really unique photos, it just so happened that a lot of that ended up on Instagram Reels. It ended up that, especially in a place like LA or New York, there's a lot of celebrity there. So we were able to do a lot of like influencer placement. And in a lot of ways, if you're familiar with the term blitz scaling, we were able to blitz scale that business because of that organic growth boost, right? And so that's, basically going to market in a bunch of markets at the same time to seize market share and visibility. And so we were able to do that because of that organic growth.
Yeah, blasting it all at the same time. A buddy of mine said, he's like, man, as long as you have a cool thing that the girls can take photos with, that does all the promo for you.
He's not wrong. Now, it does have to, I think, have some lasting staying power. Yeah, I think having that in mind is really part of the magic, because really, like, if you get into the guest mindset, this is a little game I like to play, like anytime I go to a place. It's like, how could the guest experience be better? And more importantly, like, how do I share this experience with my friends and family, right? Or my social media outlet. And so I'm constantly looking for strategic placed photo moments or interactivity or membership opportunities, because I feel like there's some bad actors in the market. There always are. These are like kind of like your classic like low-end promoter type mentality, which is just a cash grab. Everyone's disposable. I'll get you through the door one time and I'm going to replace you with a new person the next time, right? That's like the opposite of what we're trying to do. And really that's kind of informed how we're approaching what we're doing with Deed, which is more long-term, semi-permanent venue locations that are designed around community engagement over a multi-year track. And so that's pretty much where we're headed in 2026 and 2027, taking all that we've learned from all of these experiences, ranging from the music festival stuff to the experiential stuff, and putting it all under one really like strategic roof that is super custom, right?
Yeah, I see the hat that you got on, Nifty's World. It's one of your new projects. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. Nifty's World is one of my new projects. This is it's a couple layer. I like to have multiple levers in any business, right? And so it's part tech, it's part real estate development, and it's part hospitality experiential. It's designed around a brick and mortar building designed in the arts district of Las Vegas. It's designed to be hospitality 2.0, ranging from citywide AR engagement that would basically be like a scavenger hunt throughout all of the casinos on the strip that would gamify your stay and lead you to an incentivized or rewarded stop by at Nifty's once it's built, to having multiple floors of the building that are designed just for seasonal experiences. We're talking about everything from like music history to like an NBA experience that's mostly around shoes. There's lots of different things that are kind of in the pipeline there. And I spent about 3 years in Vegas developing the project, and we're underway the capital raise now, which, raising capital is one of the parts of, any project that is going to scale. It needs a proper capital cushion. So we're in that process now.
So it sounds like a combination of like Pokemon Go, NFTs, and
oh yeah,
that futuristic festival they have in the desert in California. I forget what it's called.
It is a mix of those things. And in fact, my co-founder, Sid, he is a big collectibles and merchandise guy. He's been in the toy space for 30 plus years, has a print on demand business working with big brands, and was a pretty big degen when NFTs were big. We have some signed LOIs with groups like the Bored Ape Yacht Club groups, and I think that we're going to experience a swing back of Web3, and I think collectors are going to come back to that market. It probably will never be the bull run of 2021 again, but I do think that being a collector of really anything is kind of built into our DNA as people. I collected, books and I guess comic books and baseball cards and stuff as a kid. When Web3 basically opened the doors to NFTs in 2020, 2021, that was when I really started looking at the architecture behind Web3 and blockchain as a technology interface, and realized all of the potential that it actually had. Because I, like you and like many people, have these friends that are crypto enthusiasts from the beginning, and in some ways they were just so bullish on it, and I'm glad that they made a lot of money on it if they stuck with it, but they were very outlier throughout that time, and I didn't quite understand Bitcoin. I wish I did in 2000, and I got a bunch of it for $1, but I didn't. Right. But now I really understand the power of blockchain, and that's why we chose to use blockchain as part of our architecture on our tech stack, particularly for the ticketing. And let me give you a reference story why. Right. So I don't know, if you've ever had this happen to you, but I had this happen to me. I was in New York City. I was building Candytopia #2, which was across from Madison Square Garden at the Pennsylvania. And one of my, nostalgic bands that I listened to as a high schooler was Smashing Pumpkins, alternative, 90s, and they were playing the Garden. And I was like, man, I would love to see this show. It was a sold out show. I ended up buying a ticket on OfferUp, and that ticket ended up being already scanned. So I basically lost $150 and I didn't get into the show. Right.
Yeah, been there.
It's the most heartbreaking thing ever, right? And I was like, I'm going to make a system where that can't happen. Right. And so we've kind of been on that path. Some of the things that we're going to do in our immersive venues that we're building will range around concerts. And I think that the solution we're building really solves that problem of, the validity of tickets and how secure it is to transfer said tickets, the secondary market, all of those things, because it's got a blockchain infrastructure.
So you are invested in Bitcoin?
No, I don't know. I don't hold any Bitcoin. I have some Ethereum, and I have some assets from the time that we basically built some brand building events with a group out of New Zealand called Fluff World. If you look back on it, they were probably the 4th or 5th largest community for NFTs back in 21, 22. And one of our co-founders, believe it or not, was one of the original founders of the X Games. He was a rollerblader. And one of the kids that was on his team, and we're talking like early 90s, also a New Zealander, had, basically since the X Games had gone out and started a media company, and he had invested in this group called Fluff World, and they had released these three-dimensional rabbits, and they had this whole amazing white paper, and they were sitting on 200 million plus and like available reserves. So we basically pitched them doing some events, and we did 4 events with them, and this is 2021, 2022, kind of at the height of the bull run. And honestly, in the Web3 community, these are still some of the most talked about events that happened, because again, we're very guest experience focused. We really wanted to provide something different, and each show was very different. So we did our first show at Art Basel. If you've ever been down there at Miami during December, it's kind of like the Comic-Con San Diego for art in a lot of ways. And it's blown up to have these big musical events and all this stuff. So we did kind of a hybrid musical event and art event at a place called the Broken Shaker in kind of mid beach off of on the South Beach side of Miami. And then we did a show with them for the Super Bowl in LA, and that was a pretty unique one. There's a pretty famous auto museum called the Peterson Auto Museum in Los Angeles off of Wilshire Boulevard. If you're into cars, it is one of the better museum experiences you can have. I mean, they have like a rotation of all the coolest cars ever, ranging from like, the A-Team van to the 1989 Batmobile. All types of cool stuff is in there. But they have this event deck where you can rent it out. And so we basically built a very branded experience for the Fluff World team. And we booked some pretty big bands. We had like T-Pain and Chromeo play, and it was a pretty big event. And then the third and biggest one that we did was this in collaboration with South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. We basically built a immersive dome park across the street from the convention center. And so we basically had 3 projection domes and an outdoor space where we were able to host during the daytime educational programming. And we did everything from curate the talks and the speakers to interactive art exhibits. One of the coolest things we did was we had 2 fine artists basically on stage with iPads, and they had pre-planned almost like a coloring book for the guests. And we had 100 iPads out in the audience, used a program called Proteo, I think was the name of the program. And the guests were able to color in their own NFT and mint it right there, right? And that's part of the experience. And of course, to having the artist up there talking about their strategy and how they do their shading and coloring, all live. And then we would flip the script, and nighttime would become concerts. And so we had some pretty big DJs come and play in these, large scale domes, which, and you asked the question about how do you know about like metrics, right? Well, part of it is attendance, right? Like how many people come to the thing. South by Southwest typically gets between 100 and 125,000 guests per year. And over the 2 days, we had 17,000 unique visitors. Around 10 to 12% of the entire festival contingency came to these events in one shape or another. That was more than we had hoped for. And also what was really interesting about that is, in 2022 and even in 2023, it was pretty challenging to get a Web3 wallet. Right? You had to fill out all these forms on MetaMask or Coinbase, and you had this auto-generated 12-word key that if you lose it, you lose your wallet, and all this stuff that was pretty difficult for the layman to do. And so it was kind of I would say, a barrier to entry for people to get into the NFT space. And through that, educational programming, we had several kind of pathways or tutorships to be able to get people wallets and engage on site. And in a lot of ways, this became a huge marketing ramp for the company, which was immediate traction. And then in a lot of ways, it was the first times that those neophytes were able to purchase an NFT, and they got whitelisted for those NFTs because they went to the event. And it was almost just like immediate feedback, right? It's rare that you see those things unless you're in a place or you're designing an experience that has triggers for that immediate feedback. And I think that's the direction that we're moving towards as producers, just so we can make adjustments quicker to what that experience is going to be, and also how we can communicate with our fan base on an ongoing basis, right? A survey, usually around 7 to 10% are even going to open those, let alone fill them out, right? So it's not like the best cross section for feedback. If I can get feedback right away and I'm getting like immediate data through a platform that I can see like where people are engaging with whatever that engagement might be it an AR target or be it like a mini game that looks like a big version of Pong, well, I have that data right away. So I know what the dwell time is and I know what the immediate feedback is based on like seeing if there's social sharing happening. So that's, posting on social media or Instagram Reels or TikTok or whatever, the stuff that is getting lots of play or dwell time. And that way you can corroborate the data.
Yeah, collecting data can sort of seem like a chore after you've already had the experience. But if it's part of the immersive experience itself is to submit some type of information or something, that's a great way to implement the collection of the data that would help you create a better experience in the future, as well as making it part of the experience for the consumer.
100%. I think there's a two-way street, and the producer has the job to translate the data and improve what their intentional experiences are. And the guests, their job is to enjoy, right? And if we can make it so just them enjoying the experience is a frictionless way for us to get the data, well then that's a win-win for everybody.
Have you seen that this increase of people enjoying these immersive experiences has I feel personally that it's gotten a lot more immersive experiences in the past couple years. Have you noticed the same thing? That there more and more organizations are adding immersive experiences into their...
Oh yeah. Immersive is a word that gets thrown around a lot like a buzzword. But I do feel like there is a whole industry based on experiential marketing because of the immersive industry that wasn't here 10 years ago, right? And most of these agencies are trying to replicate what we did with Candytopia or the Westworld thing, which was immediate brand recognition and feedback through an experiential pop-up. And so I couldn't agree more that that's happening more and more. I think that there is a wider range of offerings now too. Some things are not, they don't come out with the right toolkit, right? Or they are one of those bad actors where they're like, what's the bare minimum that I can get away with getting this open and making my money back, and then you'll never hear from me again, right? That's out there too. But I think, for all the bad actors, there's as many or more that are trying to do the right thing, that are trying to build a brand that connects with their audience short and long term, and trying to find ways to expand into multiple markets. I think that's one of the things that we experienced with Candytopia, that Meow Wolf is doing now, that Van Gogh did, all very well, where we were able to prove a model in a major market, LA, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and then expand that to multiple markets, right? Candytopia, we had 10 locations, of which 9 of were successful, right? And honestly, you learn more from your losses than you do your wins. But when you kind of tally up all of the learning from all of the wins and the losses, you get a much clearer view of where you went wrong and why that happened. And I find it's mostly intentional. And I can talk about a loss with Candytopia briefly. We opened in one of the worst winters on record in 2019 in Mall of America in Minnesota, which gets ridiculous snowfall in general. And in this particular 2019, it was one of the worst 100-year storm records. And what we didn't know at the time, and probably should have done a little bit more due diligence, is that the locals really hate the Mall of America. And, it's this cavernous, 2 million square foot mall. It has a roller coaster in it and giant movie theater. It has an aquarium in it. It's crazy, right? But it also has about 40% unoccupied spaces. And frankly, it's kind of ghetto, right? People go there because they don't have any money, because they can just walk around a giant place that's warmed up inside during the winter and not spend any money. So on top of that, it had the most rigid permitting, even more so than LA and New York, that we ever encountered. I literally had a guy from the fire department inside set walls looking for fire retardant paint and making sure I wasn't using non-UL stickered LED power supplies, which I knew he was going to do that because he told me he would. And the only UL stickered power supplies on the market are 100-watt ones. So I actually created this like way bigger fire hazard because I had like 100-watt power supplies when I could have had 1 or 2 1,000-watt power supplies that are way more efficient with the heat sinks. But those companies are in China and they don't pay for the UL sticker, which essentially is just like extortion for electrical products, right? We won't go down the weeds there, but like it's not a real thing. UL basically just means you paid some money.
Yeah, you paid for the certification. I took a few firefighting classes myself. So.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, we took this massive loss in Minnesota. That project was only open for, I think, 6 weeks. And then we took it down and moved it to a different market because it was performing so poorly. And I mean, these were not small experiences to move. I mean, we're talking 10 semi-trucks with a week, 10 days to load it out and 3 weeks to build them. So, you know, it was about $1 million to move it. So that was more than...
Hindsight is always 2020. Is there any way that you think that you could have prevented that issue?
I think location, right? They say that for a reason. Had we been in St. Paul or the mall that's down there by where the Timberwolves play, it would have been a totally different story because that has like just natural traffic flow that is in earnest looking for stuff to do that are willing to pay for a ticket, right? We did not have that experience. And from you know, what we understand, like, you know, about malls in general, you know, they're a tough bag. You know, the mall is also dying, just like the film business, right? You know, the big box mall that has 1 million square feet, department stores were killed by Amazon long ago. And the experience of going to a mall has been replaced by things like Stitch Fix, right? So there's a bunch of empty spaces that are all now getting converted. I think that is an opportunity for potential experiential growth, but it really matters who your neighbors are. It really matters what neighborhood you're in general. It matters where you choose to put your roots down from a city standpoint because they don't always align, right? So I think that there are lots of variables if you're an experiential producer. And, you know, what I would say to people that want to do it is find a mentor, like work on some projects that aren't all yours. Learn some of the ropes before you put everything into it because it is a minefield, right? And on top of that, the market is always moving. The mindset of the audience is always changing just a little bit, right? So having some, I'd say just like found experience under your belt and then also working with teams that are you know, capitally prepared to shoulder some of that risk provides you opportunity to learn. I mean, you could do something independently too. I'm not saying don't. I mean, I think as long as you're creating stuff, you're expressing yourself. That's what you should be doing, right? But if you want to make it a long-term career, then there's plenty of opportunities to learn and to grow with teams that are already doing the things.
In such a cutting edge field like interactive and experiential entertainment, you know, that's not exactly something that, I mean, maybe it is. I haven't looked at the college course offering stuff, but it seems like, especially with AI as well, some of these topics are just so new, it's kind of hard to figure out how you would even get an education in that. Would you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, I think there are probably some like marketing and advertising classes that are talking about these experiences, but they're talking about it from a marketing perspective, not like a nuts and bolts producing perspective. I don't think there are traditional collegiate pathways for experiential, which is frankly something that we hope to change. It probably exists inside of, you know, liberal arts programs and theater programs and film and television programs. You know, I think that there are signs and indicators that that's warranted, right? I think I'm seeing, you know, new media programs coming online, which I would say are in the fringe of what we're talking about. I think higher education is also experiencing like a significant shift too, right? I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, when I graduated from one of the top 3 film school, I was like, can I get my money back? Like, I should have just been making this movie like the whole time, right? They did not
Yeah.
give me my money back. And I think it matters later in life. And I'm glad that I have the experiences. And I learned how to hustle and network is what happened there. And that skill has done me well over the years. But, I don't know that college is necessary for everyone. I think that I know as many proficient technologists that didn't go to college as I did. Like there's probably more people that skipped college than went straight into work track, because frankly that's where you learn the most, especially in the event business, because the environment changes all the time. The size of the show, the amount of the audience, the height of the roof, the fixtures that you're going to use, the amount of power that you have, the weather, if it's outside, all of these things are variables that change from show to show. And that's honestly part of the fun, right? I don't really think I could have worked in an office like trying to come up through the William Morris mailroom. I wouldn't have made
Yeah. A male intern track record,
it. Yeah.
career path.
But,
Um,
those people, that is a pathway, right? A
mhm.
lot of producers come up that way. I mean, Brian Grazer came up that way, right? Like that's kind of how it goes if you're willing to put the suit on, right? He's not the guy behind the lens though, and he's not directing the crews. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with teams in the field. I knew right away too, because you kind of get a sampling of both, and I've always been like a hands-on kind of person, doer type.
Yeah, with that film background and your desires, like, what's been working like really good for you with doing this business? I mean, it's obvious that with all these new productions and these multi-million-dollar new projects, a lot of things have been working great. But what are some things that have been challenging or like frustrating about running this type of business?
Well, one of the biggest things was the pandemic was a huge setback, right? Some of our best talent that was on meteoric rise to, taking huge positions in everything from touring shows to like owning companies got out of the business because we were the first ones out and the last ones back. And frankly, it is still not back to where it was. In a lot of ways, what has happened, because we are ultimately, for the most part, service-based businesses, we have a harder time keeping up with the economical shifting that's happening as a nation, right? So the cost of labor has increased, the cost of living has increased, and oftentimes the rates that the end client are used to paying for a corporate or even a concert haven't increased, right? So now I'm trying to do the same show I did 19 for a 2019 budget when it's 2026 and things are up 35%. So the solution oftentimes, which is not the right solution, is we can just do it with less people. Well, if every person was like $1,000 a day guy and was a leadership in their own right, and I could just have all these aces on the field, maybe, but I don't have the budget to do that. Sometimes you just need hands to move big stuff around, but always you need leadership. I think that the biggest sector within that labor bucket that is the most challenging today is middle management. And I think this is like a whole like macroeconomic discussion, right? Because it's how do we incentivize those people to stay in middle management? Because if you're good, you're going to rise to the top and then you're gone. If you're a person that's not in middle management, the gap is too big, right? Like you're just a guy that's collecting a paycheck and you want to get back to your video game, right? There's not like a whole lot of, like officer training, for lack of a better analogy, in the military. There isn't that, right? So, I think the solution is promoting within. I think the solution is like looking at companies that can scale and do that. I think that the temperament of the younger generation is skipping a lot of the steps that I was talking about, like that mentorship step, or even like, learning in the field. Like, for example, right, like one of my first mastery sectors was lighting, which in my opinion is one of the hardest trades because of the variability within it, right? There's literally thousands of fixtures out there, each one with a different parameter for how you control it and use it. And they're different in whatever environment you put it in, right? A lot of the younger generation is coming out and they just want to program the lights, and they don't understand how the logistics work, how you load the truck, how you tell the crew how to install it, how to do that in a way where you come out under budget and on time, right? And so you have someone that wants to be ahead without being body first, and that is a real problem that I'm seeing across departments, right? I think that the entertainment industry itself has done a bad job of creating an identifiable ladder that this is the way that we do things. And you're going to start at the shop. I don't care if you want to be a programmer or you already know how, right? You're going to start at the shop for the first 2 months, and you're going to learn the name of every cable and understand how it plugs into every light, and then we'll put you out on shows and this kind of sequencing. And part of that is gaps in the availability of people to do those jobs, right? So maybe you are a programmer that knows how to program, but you don't know how the rest of the show goes together, and there's a company that is short on programmers, so they don't know what you don't know. You just tell them that you're a programmer, so you got out in the field and you program, but then that company likely doesn't have like great middle management, so then you're behind, and then you're looked to as a leader, but you don't know how to lead the people. So it's kind of this like cyclical problem that I see, especially in the labor pool. And I don't know what the solution is broad term. I have my own strategy on what we're going to do at Deed, which essentially is hands-on training and then working with a core team of ACE professionals that relay those skills to local people, because we're looking at like popping up in markets that are not our hometown. Right. Yeah. So engaging with, not only like local universities that could have, people in the theater department or engineering or marketing departments to come on board. And this creates jobs locally. It creates relationships. It proves a model for public-private partnerships with universities. And then we can replicate that as we scale throughout the country. But I don't think a lot of people look that way. Right. Like I think honestly, it's incredibly difficult just running an entertainment business. Like the second hardest job I can think of is being a mid-level concert promoter, right? Like where, I am having to spend, multiple thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on talent, hoping that 6 months from now that's going to return, and I'm repeating that process all year, right? And let's not even talk about how the market is capped by the way that Live Nation plays and the way that, AEG has that market share, and how difficult it is to get people to go out all the time, right? I think disposable income is at an all-time low. I mean, we're in a high cost of living crisis right now. I don't see that changing in the next 6 months, right? So yeah. I think that the choices that are available to us as a guest are limited because of the financial implications of said choice, And that's consequently why you see the concert pricing like through the roof right now, because they know that if they're going to get somebody hooked on their concert, they got to get as much out of them as they can. And unfortunately, the talent, right, you've probably seen like bands like, Garbage can't tour in America because it's too expensive, right? Between cost of gas and cost of crew and decreased ticket sales and increased production costs, it makes sense, right? And I think that there has to be a way for everyone to win. I'm an optimist, though, a pragmatic optimist. But, I think that having ways to offset costs through efficiency is part of that pathway. At least it is for us. But there are a lot of big venues out there that remain empty and are hard to fill. Even the Sphere at 18,000 seats is not full all of the time.
Yeah.
They're paying at least $1 million per night for those residency contracts, if not more. And the bands have to pay multiple millions of dollars for their content packs to fit that projection raster, or the display raster in this case. And that can only work in Las Vegas, where the tourism is going to support 40 million different people per year. That wouldn't work in Cincinnati, that residency model. So it definitely is something that I think about a lot. Like, how do we improve the state of the industry, and from the people that are working within it to the guests that are coming. Yeah,
more research. Looks like we're coming up on an hour. Was there anything else that you wanted to add or share with us before we conclude the call?
No, I think we covered anything. Is there anything you want to ask me before we go?
Yeah, any last minute advice that you'd have for young people that want to get into this?
Yeah, I have two critical pieces. One, AI is your friend and it's not your enemy. Don't put your head in the sand. I use AI every day for both research and to make me better as a writer and as a producer. I use it every day. I use a mix of Perplexity and Claude. Perplexity for research, Claude for writing, Claude for coding, Claude for creating decks. It's only going to get better. Do not put your head in your sand. Do not waste time. Beyond that, AI is never going to replace humans because we are the ideas that shape and prompt the AI. So don't stop dreaming. Don't stop thinking about what is going to resonate with you, because if it resonates with you, it likely will resonate with someone else. Always look for feedback in your friends and your family, right? Like the worst thing you can do is work in a silo. And in fact, the only thing worse than that is to not work at all, right? Just keep doing what you're doing and find ways to volunteer, find ways to work on projects that are in your local market, because us as producers are always looking for people willing to help. I will take time out of my day to train someone on anything, be it running an audio cable, be it running a lighting board, be it showing how rigging works safely. I do that in almost every job site that I'm on. We're willing to do it. Don't stop asking questions.
Great advice. Great advice. Gotta show the youth how it's done right. Well, thank you so much, Dave. This is Dave Luff from D to Entertainment and Nifty's World. Check out his immersive experiences. If you go to something major, you're going to do it anyway.
That's right. That's right. We'll see you out there in the world.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Jackson, thanks so much.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Dave.